Chapter 4. Stepan Rakitin stood with a phone while gazing out a window in the pyramid on Montgomery Street. The pyramid, a 900-foot tall icon, pierced the San Francisco skyline. Through a vent above his head came the sound of wind shivering the 200-foot aluminum spire capping John Stone's Warren's lean pyramid. Nearby, Warren observed Rakitin's erect posture, forehead nearly touching the glass with the tips of his shoes a foot back from the steep angle of the walls. Stepan Makarovich Rakitin held the telephone receiver from his ear. He brushed at the sleeve of his tailored suit jacket, the starched cuffs of his Egyptian cotton shirt, pinned with gold cufflinks in the shape of eagles. He stood a few feet from Warren in the penthouse office. "Who is that fool, Stepan?" asked Warren. The call brought Warren out of a reverie with his engineered prodigy, the enigmatic Margot Christina Shaughnessy. He kept abreast of her insight and divination of a immortal, singular being, ancient even of old, a being indivisible from any thoughts or information of it, as being anybody appearing otherwise. Every word uttered or written by her, by Christina, transferred to him in daily briefs. The arrival of a dialectic debate accelerated the inward dissolution of any man's mind, a mind arising from paying attention only as to inward memory. Now, ask knowing its reverse or obverse, a black around indivisible invisibility. Warren chuckled to himself at what an unexpected boon that dialectic brought to his design of her DNA to trigger the release of his viral inward final solution. A resolution of our eyes solution, finding that Ivre body, indivisible invisibility. Stretched out on a wheelchair reconfigured to accommodate his nearly inert prone, Warren remained paralyzed with the exception of his left forearm, wrist, and fingers. When speech failed him, he reverted to an optically controlled word processor, both displaying and voicing his dialogue on a large overhead screen. He now thought himself more machina, out now in her eye of Ivre body of Kali Ma's, with her effing tearing her children in time to pieces, dust to dust. Soon he too would be mere microscopic nano-engineered viral dust, storming bits of it in her eye way of Ivre body as Ma's mass body. Ma Rhea's ground and pigments that I am imagining her, immortalized, colored by my design, Warren mused. Rakitin cupped his hand over the receiver. Our watchdog on James seems corner sucker punched and kicked the crap out of him. Tell him to go back to spying on adulterous husbands. I could do a better job on corner from here, Warren replied, rapping his wheelchair with a cane. Beyond the angled windows, the steel trusses of the Bay Bridge were partly erased by incoming fog. How long have you been in my employ, Stepan? Coming on 15 years. Rakitin glanced over at Warren's emaciated body, framed by the wrinkled city on 7 hills. Like Jerusalem, like Rome, like her, Ma's nature stretched out at the peninsula below, touching bay waters, reaching the sea. Long enough to know that I'm not crazy, Warren said, adding emphasis to his words with raps of the cane. Warren went silently into his memory, thinking of his father, his grandfather Jacob, son of a butcher. In 7 generations, the Warren family had carved out a pretty good slice. Sure, we all turn out to have a few bones and skulls in the closets, he thought. It's a big closet, full of brotherhoods, Templars, Masons, and all that popular lore. Allegiances. Allegiances, he pondered, often must cross geopolitical lines, shadow governments, cost of doing business. The Warren boys never flaunted their power, he reflected. Jacob's eldest son making his stake in Yerba Buena, where he sat now. This was the edge of the original shoreline where the San Francisco dream began. Our trading company had to circumnavigate certain national boundaries, and of course there was opium and the China trade and Chinese labor and whores to blame for the sudden appearance of the drug. Old Brains Halleck designed the original Warren block built on this site to withstand earthquake and fire. Good thing, too, he cackled to himself. Good thing old Brains designed 4 stories of iron and stone built on a raft of redwood logs sunk in the mud. Just below his feet, men smelted ingots of gold from the Sierras in the brick-lined basement. They cached it all deep in the ground in an iron-sheathed vault. The place got the name Golgotha after the building withstood the 1908 earthquake and fire. $100 million in gold resting in her vault disappeared after the dust settled from the quake and fire. They found the city leveled, the vault empty, looters blamed. Warren, pausing to sip from a straw, considered how by the 1950s the block was full of rats and trash, footings riddled with dry rot. San Francisco's Bay Harbor now pushed back by blocks filled with sunken ships and former hills. When the Warren block was finally turned into a parking lot, the place was a wasteland of bohemians. Warren remembered the European partners, the Messing brothers, having no interest in the site. Their interests were on the East Coast and Europe. Only I was drawn to it, he mused, like a magnet. The history, fire, and gold. So he turned the starter on the pyramid in '69. Warren stopped in his thoughts to catch a labored breath. Son of a bitch, digging 30 feet past the old vault, he recalled finding a cavity where all that lost bullion had fallen. Such are the ways of the great mystery. Considering his own body, or whoever gets stuck with it. Yeah, whoever gets stuck with it when I pass, he cackled out loud, letting out a string of muffled farts. Here I am now, ravaged by a cancer created by my own merger of toxic petrochemicals and pharmaceuticals. What have I to do but design a fast-acting bromide of sorts for the mind? Radiation treatments accelerating my conception, my solution, and dissolution. After all, I'm only saving man from the impending crisis of microbial retribution, he mused. Now he lay upon his pile, his gaunt frame shriveled on a steel wheelchair, chrome rails extended to accommodate his prone position. At his feet, within the panorama of heaven, ocean, bridges, and skyline, people in visibility, lost in the vastness of the scale. He knew the vault carried their weight or fell under it. He also knew pumps maintained his breathing, steadily lifting and lowering his emaciated figure. Of a machine. Ma es Kali Ma's body, A black, singular body of itself, creating, devouring, shrinking, stretching, reabsorbing anybody out in her eye. Of everybody is anybody. As subsuming all, black around into her out in her eye, now on him, or it dissolving any and all appearances of it, black, still one singular black around body. Of awareness, consciousness, a black with intent of a being seeing a gain, a begaining of it. His thoughts now scroll the overhead screen. I'll end the tyranny out in the word spell by setting loose a self-replicating bio-virtual cerebral virus to scatter every spoken and written language black into one word: freedom. Thought-free awareness, consciousness, Warren thought, of a being seeing now a gain, turning the black around, echoing any knowing of its still invisibility. The arc, perceived, turning, informing it, encirclement of it, of such roles or roles, any appearing of it as anyone imagined image, are ideating, perceiving out in her eye of everybody. Kali Maz, Isis Mary with a cool fire, now not. As knowing the knower, while DNA, in her eyes a fire, a lightning synapse now zapping the entire tower of rabble-babble. Humanity will be purged and heaven's praised, he marveled at his own thoughts now projected. Corner will do his part? Rick Eaton asked, moving to adjust various IVs running around his charger's frail body. I think our James will follow his self-interest no matter what havoc he may cause. The damaged professor and that lost painter are essential to my plans, but I figure you have some image waiting to substitute. Mao doing a goat or some such bloody rot. I can only try and make it irresistible to corner the professor or the painter. Offer them an opportunity doing what they have loved most in life, only a piece of the puzzle at a time. Contact our James and only bleed in for information if, well, necessary. The screen went blank. The 3-story townhouse jutted out of the steep incline of Divisadero Avenue. Corner and Moore entered a paneled foyer, floored in a herringbone pattern of polished oak. A spiral staircase led to the upper stories. I had to fight City Hall, my man. Everything is hysterical in this San Francisco, and I don't mean historical. She ain't much. There's a lot bigger joints in this neck of town, but I call her home, he laughed, stepping across the foyer and spreading 2 heavy pocket doors to reveal a high-ceilinged drawing room with the far wall of steel and glass continuing up 2 full stories of welded I-beam framework covered in several coats of gloss black paint. The room, floored with the same herringbone pattern as the foyer, was empty of furniture. Yeah, they didn't like all the steel taking over, but she's my building, at least for a while, and I need steel almost more than gold, Corner said as he strode up the stairs to an open deck sparkling with a view falling away to the north, the marina, and the gray chop of the bay. Cold air brought Moore's hand to his cheek. Yeah, I love how this town sits on the edge of the Pacific, just waiting to break loose and float on out to sea. We got to go sailing. I've got access to a sloop and a power launch berthed down there. Corner spread his arms as though giving his approval of the vista as he pointed to a breakwater a mile below, spangled with lights. He turned suddenly, the wind rearranging his hair. Follow me to the stars, he motioned to a narrow iron stairway. They clambered up to a flat roof with duckboard walkway leading to a glass cupola. At their feet, city lights shimmered off to bay and ocean. No heat, but I've got tequila to put fire in your belly. A light rain tapped across the cupola as Corner took 2 drinking glasses from the small wood bar. He hunched as he poured, the windbreaker taut against his shoulders. Moore stared at his back. To the future, he proposed, turning with an upraised glass. They settled into wicker armchairs. I told you about the professor. They don't make them like that anymore. Remember the women on Lake Geneva? Oh, my living God, those Playboy bunnies. A man rarely scores like that. What have you got in mind, amigo? A gig along the lines of the Ratnick brothers, taking down the assholes. Before Moore had left Chicago for the coast, Corner returned stateside from Vietnam. I was doing my apprenticeship for being a drunk, putting away half pints of Johnny Walker Red for breakfast, trying to wash away the bad juju in my head, Corner recalled as he swigged the tequila. We hooked up at Buddy's, remember? T-Bone was laying it down that night. We got good and drunked up, talked you into driving my 62 Caddy ragtop out to farm country. Remember? Hell yes, I remember. I was scared shitless. I knew you had a serious death wish after nomming enough booze in your blood. But then I was right there with you. And the Ratnicks, come on. JQ and JD, what a couple slime balls. Yeah, JQ had just finished kicking that little doggy to death with those pointy cowboy boots in the yard. Man, that set my teeth on edge. I could hardly wait to send that mother packing. All I remember is you running back, tossing a hand grenade, and JD running from the barn with a pump shotgun, then you pushing me down, me flooring it with my hand, us tearing off, windshield exploding. Moore replied as he held his glass up for a refill. It was a hell of a rush. Yeah, you needed a taste of being in the line of fire. Being all moral is easy when you can pay or tax pay others to do the killing. Well, for a few days I actually admired your bravado until I talked to Sherry Lynn, that teeny bopper you were doing. That tartass had been lured away from your loving embrace by the Ratnick brothers' dope and promise of stardom on the porno screen. Seems jealousy was the real reason, not taking down the bad guys. I finally had to admit you were mad. Unlike you, I never claimed to be a saint. By the way, putting the moves on the professor was bad form, Dark Buddy. What's with this house? Moore asked. I always swore I don't know more than I could fit in an Army-issue duffel bag. Still holds true. The house and boats and even the car belongs to the company I work for, Messing Technology. Sounds German. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Growing up, when and where we did, we were all aglow. The strongest and most righteous country in the world. We conquered evil in the greatest of wars. We believed. Even when I first enlisted, I felt proud to do my patriotic duty for our ongoing crusade to save democracy from the evil commies. Funny, I had those World War II images playing in my head. The ones with parades of upturned, raptured faces of the liberated in Europe. But after getting shot down, I found out that's not the way it really was at all. We were there not to save, but to kill. Kill every man, woman, child, and water buffalo. The evil we fought in Europe, it seems, had infected our body politic. We traded our democratic ideals for their more advanced chemical technology. So, can't lick 'em, join 'em? Moore asked, wincing from another long slug of tequila. I saved you, darky boy. I saved you from getting chewed up in that meat grinder. I never had a choice. They made that choice for me that day I saved you, Corner replied. Well, I guess I'm just one ungrateful son of a bitch. What about Gina? Did you save me from her as well? Now you're getting dirty. A part of me died with her, Corner answered with hanging head. When he looked up, his eyes were rimmed with tears. Christina fits into your plan somewhere. Don't try that bullshit about getting me back to painting or searching for truth. She knows you're a treasure hunter, Morse said, shifting forward, the cane chair creaking with his weight. You're a loser, afraid of what's in his own head. Don't tell me the copper scroll hasn't got you in a burn. Ancient treasure, a shot at the big score. See the possibilities, or you might as well pull up the dirt blanket right now, Corner replied, letting tears fall shamelessly. Street sweepers churned the curbside debris in the cold morning as Moore stretched his stiff muscles. He found his pickup parked outside Corner's house. He drove down to Visadero Avenue to the bay and connections to the Golden Gate Bridge. By the time his head cleared from last night's drinking, he had crossed the bridge and was heading north to the open country. Reaching Santa Rosa, he took the college exit off Highway 101, a few blocks west on an industrial parkway to a local art supply outlet. He bought art sable brushes, a 16 by 20 inch stretch canvas, and tubes of oil colors for another run at painting. Buying the materials was easy. Using them was another matter, he flashed. Leonardo da Vinci called painting the granddaughter of nature and kin of God, born of all visible things brought forth from her womb of wombs. Not too much pressure, he mused. Maybe God painted the world with a red sable brush. The sketch of Christina Shaughnessy, clipped in his box easel, sat on the seat beside him. He wanted to wait until he got to his cabin, where he would have perspective on its merit and his buried passion. Corner was right about Christina. Her infectious intelligence put a steady buzz in his brain. Incomprehensible Morse code dots and dashes warned of danger, but he wrote those off as the influence of the city's 7 hills, the sweet sirens. Now he'd found his vision in her, still maintained their power. He drove Highway 101 in his mind, painting nude rocks in the south of Market Warehouse in parallel time with turning wheels. As he had drifted into sleep in Corner's house last night, he observed his head replicating into a vast sea of heads, ever growing smaller to the horizon. He woke to sunlight, seeing the pyramid and eye traced in the plaster texture of the ceiling. He hoped the sanctuary of his cabin would help fade the dream. Moore's truck rolled in under the Flying V archway. A mile further on, he passed the original hacienda built by George Washington Vanwater in 1880. Armed with Winchesters and Colts, Vanwater had fought a bandit named Blackie Dan White and his killer sidekick Wily'Em Joe for rights to the original homestead. He extended his holdings, buying out ex-Confederate soldiers homesick for their southern roots. Moore had seen a photograph of their forlorn faces, sitting with rifles across bony knees on the very porch he now passed. In the shadows of their eyes were the distant battlegrounds of Chickamauga, Antietam, and Shiloh, canvas packs filled with hardtack and black powder, slung over tattered army shirts of butternut gray. He wanted to blast on through a gateway of time and roll into a world of tattooed, laughing braves, black Bart, grizzled miners, outlaw half-breeds in a dogfight for nuggets, nookie, and dying with your boots on. Bring it on up to date with wash tubs of iced long neck Corona fifths of Cuervo with lime and salt, marfil papers rolled around sticky ganja, pig meat roasting in a pit, dug by a 300-pound man juiced on steroids, cocaine, and Jack Daniels. Fiddlers played the big busted gals, shaking their moneymakers. Once again, it seemed Corner had colonized his mind. 5 miles of tortured dirt road brought him back to his one-room cabin. Water laughed over rocks. Yellow throats trilled unseen mates in broad oak canopies as wind ripped through the broken hills. Time here was counted in decades and millennia, unhampered by the Rolex-measured fragments of the urban world. He eased the pickup across a ford in the creek to stow his easel, drawing board, and art supplies inside the cabin. Several years ago, Moore had drifted into the tiny town of Lago Norte to escape his mourning over Gina. The annual Wild West celebration was going full tilt boogie. Mock dance hall women strutted in tight bodices, hair dressed with ostrich plumes amongst gingham sunbonnets tied into the more conservative chins. Men postured with hog-leg pistols strapped against fringed buckskin and bat-wing chaps. There was a good crowd of broad buckaroo hats and jangling spurs, a smattering of stoic Indians drifting around, sombreros cocked to shadow tired eyes. He had set out his easel, offering to draw anyone interested in sitting for a portrait. Matriarch Thelma Greer, with every day of her 91 years etched on her face, sat for a sketch and introduced him to her brother, Merrill Van Water. Merrill, lean as prairie grass and watchful under a gray Stetson, needed a carpenter. He had offered Moore a home on his Flying V ranch, a 12-foot trailer infested with a family of wood rats big as squirrels and recently ransacked by a hungry black bear. He had accepted, building his own cabin from materials scavenged from outbuildings and a bone pile of windows big as sheets of plywood, salvaged from a grand hotel that had defined the locale during the stagecoach era. Carpentry work on a rustic development accessed by an airstrip came soon after. Compared to the manicured university landscape, the valleys stretching below for miles seemed wild, though abraded by a century of logging and cattle ranching. Moore hiked the mile to his thinking spot above the traces of a prehistoric native village. He favored one among the silent impressions that may have been the sweat lodge. A haunting laughter teased him as he tried to return to a world lost to his white-bread roots. He stretched out on a flat-topped boulder, closed his eyes, and listened to the water gurgling from a spring. He imagined the village alive, huts of thatched tules and basket granaries bulging with acorns, wood smoke drifting over hunters bearing deerskin quivers of obsidian-tipped arrows. Women swayed in a grinding song, stone pestles rising and falling in unison. All thrived with the songs and laughter of naked people. He imagined they were still there, hidden in minerals, plants, and currents of air and water. Maybe when the machines ran out of fuel and steel wheels were lost on broken highways, eaten away by rust, the seed of the original people would drift back and reclaim their land. Paco and his kin belonged here. Moore wasn't sure where he belonged. The peace he hoped for in this undeveloped land eluded him still. He needed to make noise with machines to drive out nagging questions of his own validity. He slid off the boulder, hiked back to his cabin, and loaded the steel box with carpentry tools on his pickup. He would exhaust himself in the remaining daylight. He drove 2 miles to a hidden lake surrounded by custom-built log homes. Reaching the latest, he rolled out a 100-foot orange extension cord and fired up the generator. Its racket broke the even flow of natural sounds like an attack of bad temper. Moore buckled on his tool belt, shoving a 16-ounce framing hammer into one of its deep pockets. As he slipped two honed, long-handled steel chisels through leather hoops, packed a 30-foot steel tape measure into a center pocket, jamming a speed square and flat carpenter pencils in the side pockets, thoughts of the owners of these second homes came to mind. They all seemed to be part of some syndicate, flying in on occasion to hunt and fish. In all the days working on this site, he'd never met any of them. The weight of his tool bag served as analgesic for the pain in his heart, stirred by a loneliness of absentee ownership of these log castles in the sky, while children huddled in rented shacks hard by the highway miles below. He set up electric and gas-powered chainsaws, a lightweight circular saw, along with the worm drive saw. As he hoisted the weight, he thought of that turning worm, shafted by a shaft turning and turning that raised thread like a worm, wrapped around it in an endless screw meshing with a worm wheel, a toothed wheel gearing, tearing wood flesh at E-powered 44,000 RPM. That turning worm made it go around wherever the worm went. A clever mind, he thought, must work long hours to devise such an endless screw, like wage slaves indentured to inflated rents. Worms and wood danced in Moore's mind. Wormwood, Artemisia, sage and wisdom, crazed painters knocking back absinthe infused with its oils. Vincent van Gogh, drunk on absinthe and stoned on Moroccan tobacco, slicing the lobe off his left ear and sending it as a gift to a brothel. The scream of the worm drive played reveille to an inner world permeated with Christina and her scrolls and philosophy, a wormhole into which he was irrevocably drawn. He flashed on her as a tree of knowledge, with roots deep into the earth. Arms raised, the heavens bore the sensual fruit, connected with a wisdom, being a cosmic being. He wanted to realize her as cosmic prima materia, freedom beyond the graven womb, but this he could only do so long before longing prevailed. For now, he wanted to just drift on thoughts of her. Moore, in his steel-toed boots and heavy tool bag, laughed at his folly. He looked down at the log. In a blink, the earth fell away. He found himself, log in arms, flashing on what a nothing speck in the cosmos it all was. Him, the forest, the mountains, the planet, the system all disappeared in a starry sea. He set down the log and picked up the worm drive. The torque of the worm still whipped his arm. He flashed on worms, wood, and iron nails hammered through bones and flesh. Wooden coffins and their lids nailed shut sunken pits of earth as worms transfigured the body. Ashes to ash, dust to dust. Luther nailed his thesis on the door of the church at Wittenberg to protest how the remission of sins was being sold. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V had brought him to Worms, Germany, in the charge of heresy. His reward was worms and dust. Stanford's Board of Regents waited to judge Christina. She seemed to him too wild and unfettered for a university prof, but then he was an art school dropout. He found her manner baffling him in a way that recalled old demons still gnawing away at the edges of his sanity. Moore believed his world was just one memory, one glimpse, one snatch of a much larger unseen influencing life. He turned off the generator and packed his tools. The denial he developed over the last 5 years had unraveled. He must take another run at the brush. Did he fear who he would be without the disguise of his indifference? Hell yeah, he did. In that worm turning in his head made him tremble. He reached his cabin, shucked his clothes, and grabbed a towel hanging on a line. Buck naked, Moore ambled down the trail to the creek, wanting to paint his skin different colors. Below the shallow ford, a deep pool offered a natural bath. Diving into icy water shocked his brain into cold reverence such that for a split second he thought he might not make it back out. Then, adrenaline flooding in, he found himself quickly hauling out. Goose pimples covered his flesh as the chill shivered his spine. Cold had settled in the creek bed as dusk fell. He grabbed his towel and ran back to the cabin to shake the chill. Bursting inside, he grabbed a blanket, huddling in a fetal position until the rampant shivers rattling his bones finally subside. What doesn't kill you, he thought. He slipped into dry, clean clothes and grabbed the gold bottle in the cabinet. The liquor burned as it slid down his throat. He took another drink and set the bottle down. Now the madman, living upstairs in his head, had been invited down. He picked up the easel by its leather handle, kicked out the adjustable legs, and set it in the middle of the room. He reached for a box of kitchen matches to light the kerosene lamp. He took 2 thick candles from a battered steamer trunk, once Gina's. He hoped the dim light would mask the rawness of painting after so long a break. Moore gathered tubes of paint, fist-sized bottles of oil and turpentine, along with the sable brushes. He added a palette knife with a broken tip and the tequila. He saved the blank canvas for last. Adjusting the easel for height, he sat on a milk crate and pulled out a thin wooden pallet. The kerosene lamp, along with the 2 candles, flickered on the cabin's chipped top, lighting the empty canvas with a golden hue. Cold and the cabin stiffening his fingers, he kindled a fire in the wood stove, retrieving logs from the porch. Smoke escaped before he shut the stove's metal door. Acrid fumes blended with kerosene, turpentine, and tequila. With the fire stoked, he went back to the easel and canvas. There was a sketch of Christina on his drawing board, and one of Gina done when they first met. The 2 women had the same curly hair, high cheekbones, protruding bird eyes, and full lips. He took another pull on the Cuervo. He let the sketch of Gina fall, bringing Christina to the front. He held the sketch canvas for a moment, then laid it on the floor beside him, selecting tubes of umber, crimson, and turquoise, squeezing a nub of each on the wood palette. He splashed turpentine in the mason jar, dipped the large flat brush, loading it with color, then splattering it to meld in free random patterns across the blank canvas. He brushed in more turpentine, watching pale rivulets racing over the canvas as he turned it in his hand. He damped off the residual and began drawing into the wet paint with a sable brush. He swigged from the tequila. Gina loomed from the drawing. He shook off the memory, letting his fingers define the shapes of Christina's eyes and lips. He drank more tequila and reinforced the partially blurred areas with the loaded sable brush, working quickly with the large flat brush to fill in shadow around eyes and grab paint runs in the dark under nostrils, knocking highlights back out with a rag, offsetting it in the blackness at corners of the mouth. Colors bled as he continued laying darks and shadow under brow and chin. Pigments ran exploding in solvent ruptures down a slender neck. Moore dipped the flat brush in the spirits, flicking pure colors to rupture and fuse over the canvas, tracking purplish solvent tears. Dropping the brush, he carried the tequila to the porch where he collapsed into the armchair. The chair had a missing leg, replaced by a tin pot wedged under a rock. A metallic squeak punctuated the shifting of his weight before vanishing in the wind. He woke to the scream of a hawk. His head lay back against the sun-bleached fabric of the armchair. Overhead he saw the giant star Betelgeuse in the constellation of Orion, a speck of light he'd read to be 600 million miles across. The tequila bottle rested between his feet. What was the nature of an awareness that could fill such an incomprehensible space? He drank for an answer. 200 miles to the south, Christina held up a pair of binoculars, focusing on Betelgeuse, the name a corruption of the Arabic Yad el Josah, the hand of the central one, Yad, Yad He Vav He, familiar star in her eyes, a staring back, a mystery echo of a light coming indivisible from her eyes, appearing it. At a 1,500-year-old light seen now, that beginning its journey in the early Middle Ages. She now translated the light waves into Byzantine intrigue with the rise of Greek Orthodox Christianity. The West, returning to its Eastern and African roots. Christina pondered how the birth of Mohammed counterbalanced the renaissance of the Church of St. Peter in Constantinople. The clash of the peaceful followers of Abraham countered the genocidal nature of the lion. Father Abraham, shepherd or king, she wondered. Monotheism. One, the, is, am. The E singular, mem or y. The E, key, I inform us, sight, seer, seeing of it. Realizing a singular, invisible memory of a being still in the first place. Now turning out of it any knowing that as a being why by baby, she mused. Christina pondered the battle lines drawn to crash against Jerusalem's gates, a building of that dome over Herod's pillaged Temple Mountain. She now knew a real homeland lay beyond the Levant, Greece, or Mesopotamia, to the Nile, the black and red lands, and the lineage of New Kingdom pharaohs who carried the scepter of the shepherd's crook, along with the bull's flail, crossing two lands in equal arms. Shepherd kings. The procession of the mirages, bull, ram, fishes, man, lion, man, as mind or why memory. She gently pressed a fingernail into the top of her skull to leave a subtle impression in the field of her awareness. Then, taking a long, slow breath, drawing from the base of her spine, flexing it forward on its tail pivot, she squeezed her abdominal muscles to draw cerebral fluid up to her spine into her brain. She followed its flow with attention of her awareness moving to the impression on the top of her scalp. The pressure of the spinal fluid squeezed against the crystals of her pineal gland created a magnetic piezoelectric field, drawing in a current synapse from the 8th chakra, inches above her head. She tapped the cosmic memory, as cause, y'all, overstanding any mirrored understanding of it. Christina chuckled at the seemingly now casual approach to tapping that cosmic overmind or why memory. The fact was, this discipline came hard years in the making, years in recovery from Jerusalem, from the incident. That encounter cast her eye on a do-or-die dilemma. Succumb to victimhood or conquer that devouring sense of isolation and alienation from herself, out of it in her eye of everybody. This recovery included a crippling codeine habit that had put her eye on the street, saved only by a university tenure. She now still served on probation with full censure waiting in the wings. Some did call it in her eyes any crazy lady, wild and crazy. They did not know her to be a murderer as well. Still they might see in her eyes a Kalima, a mother who devours her own children in relentless crushing jaws of time, a Parantakala, a supreme end time engendered by showing Ariel of it out in her eyes and merely appearing a gazing it, or it appearing information of it by now a knowing out of it supernaturally as zany thoughts of it, a being seen out in word information of it. Still wondering, is it better to kill or be killed? Now she knew neither to be true. If you think you kill or are killed, you know not the truth. She recalled these words of Lord Death from Kathopanishad. Finding them true now, hammered on the evil of samsara, suffering, it seems, promotes a desire for it in a way with gravity weight of that weighting of death, of that supersonic gravity of appearing as toward any disappearing in our idealization of the situation, of a being seen merely awareness of appearing a gazing it, a being still in the first place. It took a few blows to the inward head as any thoughts now inform as any hating of it information. Christina resisted using subtle body seduction on certain members of the Board of Regents. She now already skated on a thin ice of Dharma, of law, and with blood already on her hands. His blood, now her blood. She surrendered to the melatonin released from the pineal pinecone gland, re-entering the yawl-soaking singular darkness as a leap black around, turning into her eye of Ivre body, a first supersonic person, singular presence, a being seen in a Y-eye by now out as existing supernaturally as thoughts information, informing it as cosmic day, do I not light igniting as any knowing, now as cosmic microwave ray black around, echoing as any intent of a being seen a gain in word, information a while, a merely in a word freedom, untouched awareness of it appearing a while in a Y-eye of a being seen merely appearing, a gazing it in the first place. Now a Pasai whole power out of it in her eyes of everybody at attention of anybody, anything, anytime, now, anywhere. A power that commands us yet is at our command. A power not to be trifled with. She nah mess with no stinking board. She nah I verse of the inward consensus with the AY dialectic debate set toward a raging of the Cajun, breaking open any inward captivity of attention. Freed now merely in a word freedom awareness of it, ask knowing out anything, anybody, etc. In a word freedom now of any knowing out of it in word memory, of man mind or why, of an inward mind or a Y-eye merely freely appearing and gazing it still in a word freedom. A Y-eye merely appearing, a gazing it, or it as any thoughts of any intention, as Kabbalah function, as king of it, as cause of a being seen, a wave ray eye function supersonically appearing out of it anything or anybody ignited by ignoring it, positively negating it a while. She now permeating that negation as thoughts of a projecting out, a being still as cosmic. The existing now, a while beguiled in the existing craft of her Ivre body, a quantum unified, you not now, a field, You not now. A positive negation igniting that felt electrical field of love, supreme, blissful blackness. Christ the Almighty, Christ the Almightiest cause, causally why body, golly body. Ka as cause, y'all, still potential virgin, even while appearing in day into why not light, as X, y'all, as sexual, wise now otherwise X, black body cause and effect a while, a cunning lie, Kali, Kali Maz. Her eyes open. Glancing at her phone, she had been out relatively 45 minutes. Why Zex? Why sex? Beyond the obvious, she wondered, still tasting the artist, the darkness on her lips. It freaked her how quickly her transcendence from the energy of her second chakra had been breached. She regretted overreacting to his kiss. Perhaps Jerusalem still chilled her blood. She did not doubt, had a knife been in her hand, Dark would have bled for his transgression. Strangely enough, she wanted to see him again, and soon. Moore found no solace in the painting, so he tried with the tequila. Naturally, the alcohol only loosened an inherited madness waiting to devour him. He flashed on how the Poppy Jones had ravaged his junkie father. He launched himself back into the cabin. The place seemed to rock like a boat. The kerosene lamp still burned. The candles melted into wax puddles. Light tightened his vision, squeezing into a continuous red band as air compressed with heavy fumes of turpentine. 98. Moore, gripping the drawing board under his arm, grabbed the box easel by its leather handle. Jerking it forward, turpentine crashed to the floor. Stumbling against the cabinet, he knocked over the lamp, exploding into the pool of turpentine. He stared, transfixed by the spreading flames, till searing heat forced him back out the open door, still clutching the easel along with the drawing board. Out in the cool darkness, mesmerized, he watched flames crawl across the canvas, turning lips to a snarl and eyes to black holes. Jumping off the porch, he leaned against the bed of his pickup, watching his home burn. Flames licked at a black, moonless sky. The near-empty tequila bottle dangled from his hand, the easel, and his drawing board with sketches of the two women tossed in the truck bed. Moore took one last pull and heaved the bottle into the conflagration. The tinder dry walls collapsed, bringing down charred and flaming broken rafters. Wind flattened a wall of smoke, singeing his lungs. Turning away, he saw the fire in his eyes reflected in the truck window. Heat cooked his backside. He hauled himself into the cab and drove. The ride to the highway gave him time to consider the consequences of his actions. The cabin was no great loss compared to the threat to his mental stability. He needed someone warm and friendly. Punching it up to drive and heading south, he imagined the soft smile painting Christina Shaughnessy. In the early morning mist, only the tips of the Golden Gate Bridge towers were visible as Moore drove out from the Robin Williams tunnel. With the cabin burned, his crossing the gate signaled a return. San Francisco, embodying home as much as any place he'd known. The bridge spanned spirit with form, a now shrouded nexus linking two poles of the gateway of two worlds. Parking his truck on the north side, he walked the bridge, wearing a black leather jacket against the chill. The light Sunday morning traffic breached the fog, shuttering the expansion joints as he neared the north tower. He glanced down 200 feet to an outflow of 7 rivers, ripping into currents, meeting incoming ocean tides. He neared the spot he had once witnessed a suicide jump. Here the power of dissolution of rivers and memories exerted its strongest diffusion. The abyss merely waited to be leapt. He realized that day of the suicide the bridge became a passageway for him between living and dying. He'd been peering over the railing that day when a bound figure launched from a tower alcove overhead. His gaze seemed suspended in time as the bald figure dropped, disappearing into the current with hardly a splash. He remembered staring, somehow expecting the jumper to pop back up on the surface. Later, he saw a photograph in a newspaper of a male jumper wearing goggles just before launching with hands cuffed behind. Obviously, the man wasn't taking any chances that his survival instinct might prevail. He recalled the black hair matting the jumper's shoulders and forearms, imagining him scrubbing it under a shower, now to be combed by riptides and shark's teeth. Iron bridge spanning the Golden Gate, iron the end of a star's nuclear fusion. Traveling crane decapitated an iron worker before bridge construction was completed. Moore knew his name, but not that of the suicide he had witnessed. Was that another death he tasted in the salty air? And whose? Moore remembered walking the bridge early every day after witnessing the jumper, talking to the bridge cops and toll collectors. He had read everything he could find about its superb design and making tons of iron seem to float in space. He'd read how so much was theoretical about the engineering in that pre-computer era that the designer, fired before construction began, continued to have doubts about its structural integrity long after the bridge was built, and furthered his calculations till the day he died. He imagined the engineer buried in an apartment full of leather-bound, inked ledgers needed then to make the calculations. He learned the towers of the bridge, 700 feet above the water, were actually a honeycomb of steel cells. In meeting and interviewing some of the maintenance crew, he gained an opportunity to see the bridge from different perspectives. In the course of their permanent painting job, the boys gave him a ride on an antiquated elevator the size of a refrigerator to access the upper reaches of the towers. There was no room inside the elevator, so he had rode on top. He fingered the scar from that ride when a protruding bolt had ripped through his jacket on the descent. Looking at the tower now, he imagined men breathing unventilated lead fumes inside those cramped cells, buckering up white-hot rivets, no welding. Rivets heated red-hot and tossed up from the deck, headed with pneumatic hammers held with muscle, gut, and bone, each tower with over 600,000 of them white-hot iron nails, thick as Buddha's thumb. Millions in the whole bridge, hammered with the lives of iron-willed men. Men who often found themselves worked out of a job, left without enough coin to pay the bridge toll. The maintenance crew had allowed Moore to stand in the crow's nest at the top of the towers, thousands of tons of steel, and watch salt-heavy mists hurtle by at freight train speed. The city had vanished in the mist, as had 700 feet below churning waters, ripping back into the source, Mother Ocean, tearing in to meet and eat her children. Shortly after the elevator ride, he had a terrifying dream of a colossal god devouring the bridge with people dropping off like fleas. The god's mouth swallowed him in gray as he walked the ruined bridge into the misty abyss. Now he once again entered the city, his country refuge reduced to ashes. He tasted smoke as he thought of Christina. Her awareness mocked his delirium. His clothes, stained with pain and ash, reeked of wood smoke and road dust. He needed to get clear with Corner before he attempted to see her. The image of the canvas, devoured by the flames, provoked a pain in his gut. Layers of fog slowly withdrew, revealing a smoky orange sun. Page 100. Moore stopped to watch a cargo ship stacked with steel containers pass under the arched span. The perspective lines of the bridge truss and girders zigzagged back to where he stood. The top of the truss formed a shelf that extended several feet beyond and under the rail of the walkway. A body could jump over the rail with plenty of room to stand before making the last jump, several hundred feet to the water. A 2-inch pipe ran the center of the ledge with inline valves, a water line used for high-pressure washing to prep surfaces for the international orange paint applied 24/7 as a barrier to the constant corrosion of the salt air and fog. The brink of the ledge was reinforced with 2 I-beams 4 inches thick, with 3 inches between them and the truss. A black purse sat wedged in that space. Cars and trucks pounding over the roadbed shook the railing as he leaned over for a closer look. From the position of the purse, whoever had been standing there was another jumper for the statistics. He thought twice, then leaped over and snagged the purse by its dangling strap. He almost slipped off the damp shelf, just managing to get back over the railing before a bridge cop pedaled up on a bicycle. Moore, heart pounding, jammed the purse inside his jacket. "What the hell you doing, buddy? What the frick?" "Oh, how's it going?" Moore offered with a sheepish smile, still breathing hard. "I seen a few jump off, but I never seen anyone jump back up," the patrolman replied, lifting his cap to scratch the top of his head. "Oh, that. Dropped my bag when I leaned over to look at that container ship," Moore said, pointing off. "Must have been damn important to risk becoming instant fish bait. Might say it's all I got left in the world." "Well, hold on to it. Things always look better when the fog lifts," the cop said. He wore a uniform short-sleeved shirt that bulged tight over broad muscles and dark aviator sunglasses. He carried a 9mm automatic pistol and a nightstick on a web belt. He showed no sign of moving as he looked him over. Moore started walking toward the parking lot. The bag felt like a slab of contraband wedged under his armpit as the man in blue rode alongside of him. "Anyone go off lately?" he asked, taking in the city skyline floating in the morning haze a mile distant. "Yeah, a few days ago. I guess a few hundred have jumped. Try 100 times a few hundred. We get about 2 a week." That's true.